Hello, my name is Ray Lapuz, and in this presentation we will be looking at the calculation of the cost of credit. This is related to our BUS113 personal finance course. So when you borrow money, whether it be through a credit card or a bank loan, the institution will be able to make money through interest that they will charge you. So the interest comes in the form of an annual percentage rate. APR is a percentage or cost, relative cost of the credit on a yearly basis. So the word annual is yearly, percentage rate is going to be the amount of interest that you will be charged. So an APR yields a true rate of interest for comparison with other courses of credit. By the way, my presentations do come with some random pictures that might be slightly related. They tend to be kind of meme-like, and so you can enjoy it or ignore it. All right, let's take a look at the calculation of simple interest. Simple interest is the interest computed on the principal only without compounding. So there are other calculations, there are other math involved in compounding interest, but in this particular scenario, let's just look at the simple interest formula. And it is a dollar cost of borrowing your money, and the formula for the interest is going to be the principal times the rate times the time that the interest has accrued. So if we're looking at an annual rate where you just compute the interest annually, then your time would be 1. If you have an annual rate and you compute the interest for 6 months, then your time would be 1/2. Okay, so this time here is what we're going to be focused on. Generally, the principal would be the original amount, and then if you start paying off some parts of the principal, it'll start going down when you continue your calculations. All right, that's simple interest. And let's actually think about the simple interest calculation with an example. So here's an example. This is an example that we'll use throughout the presentation. And let's assume that you borrow $4,000. So with $4,000 that you borrowed, you agreed to pay it back one time at the end of the year. So you borrowed it on January 1st, you're going to pay it on December 31st with a 5% interest. So let's calculate the interest that's involved here. According to the interest formula, it's going to be the principal times the 5%, so that's 0.05, and you're going to pay this off at the end of the year, so the time that has elapsed is 1 whole year. So the interest, the total interest is going to be $200. If you pay the total amount of $4,000 at the end of the year, you're going to pay your $4,000, but then you add on the interest, you're actually paying $4,200. So at the end of the year, you will pay $4,200. So you paid an extra $200, and that's a $200 that the bank will end up making from your business. All right, so let's take a look at the scenario where you might be paying off one time in the middle of the year and one time at the end of the year. So again, let's suppose you borrowed $4,000 on January 1st with a 5% interest. But now instead of just paying one time at the end of the year, let's imagine that you're going to have 2 installment payments. One's going to be in the middle of the year, let's say July 1st or June 30th, and then one at the end of the year. So how much are your payments going to be? Let's first decide how much the payment is for the first part. Now, with a $4,000 balance, you're going to pay in 2 installments, so half of that is $2,000. But before we get to the $2,000, you currently have a $4,000 interest. You're going to pay times 5% times half of the year, since the amount of interest has accrued from January to June. And so June 30th or July 1st, you're going to pay an interest of $100. Now, you also are agreeing to pay half of the $4,000. So your payment will be the $2,000 in principal payment plus the $100 in interest payment. So you paid a total of $2,100. Now you still have a balance of $2,000 in principal, and you're going to pay that off in December. So you're going to do the similar calculation for the interest, except instead of $4,000, you're just going to pay $2,000. So with a $2,000 principal and a 5% interest for the second half of the year, that interest is only going to be $50. So then you'll end up paying $2,000 plus $50, so that's $2,050 by January 31st. Now you add these two together, you paid $2,100 in June or July, and then you paid $2,050 in December, and so you paid a total of $4,150. Now, if you remember from the previous page, with only one payment, you paid $4,200, but now you're only going to pay $4,150. So the amount of interest that you paid by having the declining balance throughout the year, you're paying a little bit less interest. All right, let's continue on with the same scenario, but this time you agree to make 4 payments. So you say you borrowed in January, you're going to make your first payment sometime in April, second payment sometime in June, another payment sometime in October, and another payment finally in December to pay everything off. So with $4,000, you can imagine breaking that up to $1,000 principal payments in each of those 4 payments. And then, so your balance will be declining along the way. So let's see how the computation of that will go. So to find the interest for the first payment, your original principal was $4,000, and then you have a 5% interest times 1/4. And that's 1/4 because you're accumulating the interest from January to sometime in April. That's 1/4 of a year, and that is going to be $50. So your payment, remember, comes in 4 payments, so that's $1,000 plus the $50 interest. And so $1,000 in principal, $50 in interest, that's going to be $1,050 for your first payment in April. Now in June, for your second payment, your interest will only calculate what's left over. Since you paid $1,000 out of the $4,000 in your principal, you only have $3,000 left. Now from $3,000, you can compute your interest with a 0.05 and a 1/4 again. So you're going from April to June, and that's only 1/4 of the year. The total interest is going to be $3,750. So with a $1,000 principal and a $37.50 interest, you're going to pay $1,037.50 for your second payment sometime in June. Your third payment in October will be $1,000 less in principal, so that's $2,000. You got the 5% and the 1/4 again, and that's only going to be $25. So your payment in October will be $1,025, and then finally your last payment, since you're only going to have $1,000 remaining in your balance with a 0.05 and a 1/4 in 1/4 of a year, that's only $1,250. So you got $1,012.50 for your final payment. And then if you put all this together, you made a total number of payments. The total amount that you're paying is $4,125. Okay, so again, thinking back, we started off paying one time in the year at the end of the year. That's $4,200, and then we had one payment in the middle, so we made 2 payments throughout the year, and that turned out to be $4,150. And so now with 4 payments, you're gonna only pay $4,125. All right, so you can imagine if you make more payments throughout the year, then the amount of interest that you'll be adding on will be a little bit less and less. Okay. All right, So the general idea is when you're doing your credit cards, you want to avoid the minimum amount. So credit cards usually encourage you to just pay the minimum amount, and then they'll keep charging you interest on your remaining balance. But the sooner you pay off your balance, of course, the less interest you'll pay, and that's what you want to go by. Now you kind of have to balance your actual what's happening in your real life versus what's happening in your credit card, and so you want to keep that in mind. But the idea is that the sooner you pay off your credit card debts, the less interest you'll pay, the less money you'll have to pay the banks. All right, and that covers our learning objective for section 5.4. The learning objective is for you to be able to cover the finance charge annual percentage rates as you shop for credit. So it turns out that there's an actual law here where the creditors are required to state the cost of borrowing so you can compare whether it be credit cards or loans. You want to be able to compare to see what the best annual percentage rate is for you. Okay? All right, that's it for this lesson, and I hope from here you're going to be able to attack those worksheets, those problems that we have, and I wish you all good luck.